Yeah, and I think that logic of the school to prison pipeline is appealing to people because we can see how it would be true in the most egregious cases, right?
Right.
Like if we are calling the police because, a 5-year-old in the lunchroom, throws their Skittles or whatever. Like obviously there are things we could do that could start kids down that road, that would be far too extreme on our part. I think we get so afraid of those extreme cases, though, that we get ridiculous in the other direction and say, okay, like even when we have actual violence in the classroom, we have to tolerate it because we don't want to trigger the school to prison pipeline. Well, it's like in that case, it's the violence that's going to probably get this kid landed in jail. And what's really interesting to look at the empirical evidence now is that we have enough cases where there have been discipline reform efforts put in place that we actually know when you are softer on the rules, when you are softer on consequences in school, the school to prison pipeline gets worse, right? These things escalate outside of school, right? If we allow kids to bully one another in the classroom and don't do anything about it because we don't want to call the police or we don't want to suspend, well, all of that spills over into real world violence and real world consequences in ways that, probably were kind of predictable, but really are showing up in the data now. That like we're not doing kids any favors on the school to prison pipeline front by being more lenient about bad behavior at all. It's
Oh my
backfiring.
goodness, yes, you are so dead on. You were dead on. And I think that there's a parallel there that I see in just classroom management for teachers in general,
Yeah.
which is that we enable worse behavior the less structure we provide them, because the kids will fill the inefficient time
Yeah.
with craziness. Like if your lesson is not well structured, so that there's downtime, and this is something I do a lot of PD around the country for different music education stuff. And it's one of the things that I teach in those is that if, as music directors, because I direct like ensemble music primarily, I teach some other music classes too, but primarily music ensembles. If I've got 40, 50 kids in front of me, my biggest class is 80. Last year's 95. If I've got this many kids in the room and I stop the rehearsal and then appear to be confused about what we're going to do next, and I'll get back with you in 2 minutes, there will be chaos in the room, and that will lead to a behavior, maybe a negative or bad behavior, that probably would not have happened had I just had my shit together, like that. And I think when you extend it out to what you were just talking about, which is building level discipline policies, and when we're talking about the whole building, the same principle applies. If we allow students to fill the void and with no consequences, they might make a decision to do something even worse than they ever would have done had we, as the adults in the building, just had our stuff together about how the expectations would be meted out in the building. Is thoughts on that? Am I onto something? I've never been a principal, but
No, yeah, absolutely. Again, I think it goes back to the reality that school is a constructed environment. It's an environment that we're responsible for as adults because we make the kids be there and we set the rules. And kids will naturally test boundaries. Kids will naturally pick at each other. They'll naturally, compete with one another and get into little fights, and like to some extent that kind of thing is developmentally appropriate, right? Like it's necessary for kids to show off to each other and kind of challenge one another. I mean that's just part of growing up and being a teenager and becoming an adult, and we have to be the ones to keep that a safe process, right? To keep kids safe in the school environment. And it's natural for kids to test those boundaries, and I think when we make kids realize that there are no boundaries, we're not doing our job as adults. We're
yeah.
letting kids test the boundaries and then get away with it and realize I don't know who's running the show here because it's not the adults. Maybe it's me. I don't think that's a good message for kids to get, and it certainly is not conducive to education.